What's going on, everybody? My name is Heitter. I got a special guest with me tonight named Hunter Doyle. If you guys are not familiar with Hunter, Hunter has his own YouTube show, but I'll go ahead and let Hunter introduce himself to everybody.
Hey, Steve. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm honored to be on here with you talking some football today. And yeah, you guys can check me out on Philly Insider Podcast, where I'm covering the Eagles as much as I can, try to dabble in some Sixers and Phillies, and I write for Inside the Eagles on fansided.com. So yeah, that's pretty much me, and I'm excited to talk some football today.
So for you guys who may not understand what's going on here, Hunter and I have kind of come to an agreement that we're going to form a podcast together. And we've come up with a preliminary name of the Analytically Incorrect Football Podcast. So, guys, welcome to episode 1 with Hunter and I. We're glad to have you guys along with the incorrect analytics we're about to provide you today. So, Hunter, I'll just start the conversation off by talking about this crazy quarterback carousel. This is the second year in a row that I've personally kind of heard the rumblings that, there's going to be so many quarterbacks moving in the offseason. Some guys moved last year. I mean, there was some movement. There was a little shakeup. It wasn't nearly as, controversial or hot take worthy as people were anticipating, right? Wentz might have been, honestly, arguably the biggest movement that occurred. Yeah. And he might be a part of year 2. I guess we could start right there, Hunter. What are your thoughts about this whole situation with Carson Wentz and the Indianapolis Colts?
Yeah, it's crazy looking back a year ago, because after last year, I really thought Carson was going to have a phenomenal season with the Indianapolis Colts. And I would say he kind of returned to 2019 form in a sense. It was not as good as his MVP season, obviously, but we saw those flashes of potential. And we also saw those games like he had in 2019, where obviously the weapons were not there, but, the game against Seattle he had that year, the game against New England he had. You could even argue, in some parts of the game against Minnesota too, where he just didn't really perform at the level you would hope he would perform at. So it really is just crazy to think he could be on the move again. Look, on paper, his numbers look pretty solid. I mean, I think he's definitely going to earn a starting gig somewhere else with, the potential movement of some players this year. But I'll turn it over to you, Steve. I mean, what do you think kind of led to it looked like the last 2 games in that New England game, even this year when Jonathan Taylor kind of won them that game, things just kind of fell apart completely for him. What do you think happened in those games that kind of led to him being at this point again?
I hate to say it, but I feel like maybe the pressure mounted on the importance of that game in Jacksonville, because Carson Wentz had not had a bad season up to that point. I mean, he was definitely a little, up and down. I mean, there were moments of doubt, you could say, but he had beaten some really good football teams heading into that stretch. And then he dropped whatever that was out there versus Jacksonville. And I don't even know how to describe that. I mean, that was like, if you took all the bad attributes of Carson Wentz and combined them and piled them up into 4 quarters of football, man, he put it on display for you. I mean, were you shocked at how bad he played?
Yeah, I was absolutely shocked, because even in 2020, in that awful, horrific season we had, in some of those fourth quarters of those games, he was pretty phenomenal. I mean, you look at, maybe not phenomenal is the right word, but he brought the Eagles back in those games. And maybe that's part of that's just being down by such a big deficit. But I thought in the fourth quarter of that Jags game, you would at least, like you said, it was a full 4 quarters of horrific Carson Wentz football. I thought in the fourth quarter of that game, he would start to bring it back a little bit. That was not the case. And you have to wonder too, like, I want to ask you, do you think part of that's the rumors about the bad coaching or not bad coaching, the reluctancy to some of the coaching he's getting?
Hard to say that it's bad coaching, man, because, they got some really, really good minds in that room in Indianapolis in terms of the quarterback coach, in terms of their head coach. I mean, they went and even brought in one of his friends in Press Taylor, who I was very skeptical of as a quarterback coach. I know that I said some words about Press Taylor, and I felt like they were trying to hide him behind Carson Wentz. But it shouldn't have fallen apart the way it fell apart there. I mean, I thought that this has to some extent it's got to fall on Carson Wentz, because, you've been in the league for a while. I'm not saying that guys are perfect, after 5 or 6 years in the league. Like, there's still guys that get better every single year, no doubt about it. But it was just the tragedy of eras and, like, the comical way in which it kind of all came about that makes this such like a fascinating discussion of like what's going on with this young man? Like, how did we get to this point to where it just feels like Carson Wentz is just like he's cooked? Like this might be the end for him in Indianapolis. And to be honest with you, I got to be real, Hunter. I don't even know if it's the end for him in Indianapolis because $28 million cap figure, 22 in base. I mean, don't get me wrong, they can definitely get back some pretty serious change against the cap by letting him go. But who are you getting? Who are you going to get to replace him at the price level? Like, I mean, they would really have to feel disillusioned that like, yo, this dude's not it because we're just wasting our time and we got to go on it. And I think that says a lot that if the Eagles were willing to let you walk out the door and eat $35 million in dead money, I know in the end against the cap is only like $100,000. It's not really that big a deal, but nonetheless, we ate a ton of dead money to make this, facilitate this. And then on top of having that happen, now you got Indianapolis, with your ex, coach who you had the highest of highs with. And then you got a GM there who's just ticked. He's ticked at how he got him. He probably feels like Howie depanced him a little bit. I got to tell you, Hunter, that's a crazy one to watch develop here because I'm hearing rumblings that the Washington football team, Washington, whatever the Commanders, God, what a terrible name, that they have interest in Carson Wentz. I mean, would you fear Carson Wentz back in the division?
I probably would not. Like you said, the fact that this GM, Chris Ballard, who generally was considered a pretty smart guy before this trade, and I'm not saying one move changes the perspective of him, but like you said, it did feel like he kind of got the pants by Howie. And for him to be willing, keep in mind, Indianapolis has tried, Luck retired, then they had Brissett, then they had Rivers. Like, they would be going on their fifth quarterback in 5 years, I believe, if my math is correct. That's not something, like you said, with the money and the contract Carson Wentz is in, that they probably would want to do, or that they probably thought they would be looking at doing after that season. But they feel that they have a roster in place that they can compete now. I think there's still some other holes in that roster, but obviously quarterback, if you fill that, you're in a pretty good spot. And in the AFC, with the Bengals, the Bills, and Chiefs, and the Chargers coming up right now, like, that's not a conference where you can really mess around at that position. And I think as far as him coming to Washington goes, yeah, I'm not really fearing him too much. I think they've got some guys there, Gibson and McLaurin, obviously a nice part of that offense, but I still think their offensive line, I know they had a good year. I still think they're a little bit suspect, and they'll be healthier next year for sure, but I'm just not sure. Scott Turner was under some criticism this year, and maybe a new quarterback will do them well. I'm just not sure he's the guy who's going to be an answer there per se. I don't think he's going to necessarily flip things on the head and turn it around for them. I think they have other problems to solve as well, but quarterback is a big problem they do have to solve.
Yeah, big time deal. And I'll say that Carson Wentz would be a pretty big increase in value for them, but he's a wild card. At any moment, you could get that bad side of Carson Wentz that, with the good, unfortunately, with Carson comes the bad. And
yep.
Boy, that's a tough one because I still think he's a talented guy. I think the talent's there, but man, he's as inconsistent can be. I wouldn't have any faith in him. Yeah. I want to talk about another guy that's maybe not the highest of high profiles here, but he's been linked to Philadelphia. I don't know how strong that link is. I'll be honest with you. I saw the comments from Monday Morning Quarterback and Albert Breer. I didn't think that it was as strong as a link as it's being made out to be. I think it was just more so a generalization of the Eagles got draft capital. They got cap space. If they really wanted Jimmy Garoppolo, they could get him, but there's no way of knowing what the real interest and value is in Jimmy Garoppolo. Is he an improvement over Jalen Hurts right this second? Arguably, right? He's won playoff games. He's been to the Super Bowl, 2 NFC championship games. There's certainly a pedigree that's not there with Jalen Hurts at the moment. With that said, I got to be honest, man. I feel like Jimmy Garoppolo is fool's gold. I think it's fool's gold. And you can say that he wins, Steve. Like, no matter what we want to say, the guy just, San Francisco has been better with him than without him. But my hesitation here is, cool, that's great. They also still drafted Trey Lance, like, in the top 3. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, they're giving up on him for a reason.
Yeah.
They must feel like he's holding back their offense to an extent. So if I'm going to bring him to an offense to where I feel like I still need this, I don't know if I would call him a veteran quarterback, but, for the purpose of the conversation, he's certainly more veteran than Jalen Hurts. I need him to elevate players. I need him to elevate the play. I don't see it. And the other thing I'll counter with is, how in the world do you sell Jimmy Garoppolo to the locker room? That's not Russell Wilson. That's not like you can say, guys, this is Jimmy Garoppolo we're talking about. That's not going to sell. That's not going to work. Like, what are your thoughts about those rumors?
Yeah, and so we just talked about Carson Wentz kind of being an inconsistent player. I obviously, I'm not saying Jimmy Garoppolo is Carson Wentz, but to an extent, he has that inconsistency to him. Like one play, he'll hit that backside dig over the middle with anticipation and lead Debo in stride for a ton of yards after catch. Next play, he'll have like a pick a side read and he'll pick the wrong side based on doing the wrong math pre-snap and stuff, like just little things like that. So there's just some boneheaded decisions he makes that, like you said, it's not the same as bringing in a Russell Wilson into the locker room. This isn't a move that elevates you to, a contender per se. I don't know. I think the Eagles obviously still have a lot of holes to fill. But yeah, look, Garoppolo, I'm not sure if I'm willing to give up a ton of draft capital for him. Like you said, they're probably going to move him anyway this offseason, and I'd rather let another QB-needy team who's kind of almost maybe a quarterback away and believes Garoppolo is the answer to overpay for him rather than we overpay and lose some capital and, possibly cap space in the process of it. I think he's a guy, like you said, he can win games and he'll make decisions quick. He just doesn't always make the right decision quick. So to me, it's also, an accuracy issue too. There's just times where he sails throws for whatever reason. I think that he's a guy who's got some stuff to clean up for sure. I don't think he's the answer here yet.
His numbers versus pressure are just curious. I don't know how else to explain it. He's the worst graded quarterback, on PFF versus pressure. And it's for a really good reason, guys. I mean, to your point, when you talk about, okay, get the ball out of your hands, can you make a quick decision? I mean, the guy's got a 55.9% completion rate versus pressure, which may not sound like much, guys, but that's really high. Like the only people even in the discussion of playing that well versus pressure are like, Matt Ryan and Matt Jones. And then, guys like Joe Burrow. Like those are the only guys that are that kind of completion, rate versus pressure. But here's the thing that's the kicker with Jimmy Garoppolo, which is the crazy decisions he makes. 8 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. My man has thrown 9 interceptions versus pressure. That's not good. To make things horrible, he's thrown 8 touchdowns, but yet doesn't have a big-time throw against pressure. 0. Goose egg. None. Zilch. Zip. He hasn't hit anything. 18 turnover-worthy passes, though, versus pressure. Like, I don't know how else to say this to people because I don't want to be rude to people, but it's kind of like, that's a no for me. Like, that's a hard no. I don't want anything to do with Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, what are we talking about? Why are we talking Jimmy Garoppolo? Like, are we just trying to give the Giants and the Cowboys and the Washington, whatever their names are, like ammunition to come at us? Like, what are we accomplishing by getting that? Like, that's the guy that's going to take us to the Super Bowl. I don't know if Jalen Hurts is that dude. I'd rather take my shot with Jalen Hurts for a year or two than this crazy. I'd rather take my shot with Hunter Minshew than Jimmy Garoppolo, to be quite honest. I mean, that's just the way I feel about the situation. Like, I mean, how do you feel? I mean, would you take Jimmy Garoppolo over Gardner Minshew or Jalen Hurts?
No, I'm taking both of those guys. And to your point about the turnover-worthy plays, I think he was second behind Ben Roethlisberger in total turnover-worthy plays this year. And I think he was second in, like, percentage of turnover-worthy plays. So that's definitely been an issue for him. And I think that PFF had him, like, 8th in passing versus the blitz in terms of grade. But it was kind of when, and maybe I'm a little wrong on this. I didn't watch him versus the blitz, so just as a little preface, but I think it was when he wasn't expecting pressure and then he just kind of panics a little bit and tries to play a little bit of hero ball. Maybe you can elaborate on that. But no, I'm taking both of Hurts and Minshew. Hurts, and especially I think the price comes into it too. Hurts is a cheap quarterback for year 3. I think Hurts, you saw some progression in his game this year. And as far as Minshew goes, I mean, you could argue maybe Jimmy's good and, down the stretch and on third down and stuff. Minshew was pretty good on third down when he was in the games. And I think that, I know those, Jimmy, the big argument is, he can lead a game-winning drive. He also puts himself in a position to have to lead the game-winning drive, which I think is a problem. So whereas I think, I don't want to say Hurts doesn't have his turnover-worthy plays or Minshew doesn't, but I think they're a little more careful with the ball, whereas Jimmy might be, a little bit more of a risk taker. So I'm taking my chances with both of the other guys we have on the roster.
Absolutely. And to kind of, illustrate the point here is I think Howie Roseman is a good GM in some respects. But there is kind of the funny nature of Howie Roseman kind of like setting the house on fire, then walking into Jeffrey Lurie and saying, hey, good news, man. I'm also at nighttime, I'm a volunteer firefighter, so I got this. Don't worry. That's like Jimmy Garoppolo is the Howie Roseman of quarterbacks. That's the way I view him. It's kind of like I have no interest in this guy. Like, no.
That's a good way to put it.
There has to be some kind of like saving grace, a redeemable quality to your talent that makes it worth it. And the only thing we're hanging our hats on is that with a really, really good roster built around him, he doesn't necessarily stop you from achieving a lot. But I don't know if he can elevate the play of others. And that's really my biggest concern with Jimmy Garoppolo, which is like, hey, Steve, I mean, how do you feel? Can he elevate the play of other people? And I'm kind of like, I don't know. Like, who knows? I mean, yet to be determined. And I just feel like, and I'm going to say some things that it might tick people off, but it's how I feel. I feel like Kirk Cousins is a better player. If we're talking about pure talent level, Kirk Cousins is a far more talented quarterback. Has he accomplished what Jimmy Garoppolo has? No, he hasn't. He's still a more talented player. Derek Carr's a more talented player. Is Derek Carr pretty bad against pressure? He is. To be fair, he threw like 9 picks himself first pressure, 8 picks. I mean, it was something comical like that. He also played behind a really bad, horrific, Las Vegas Raiders offensive line. I just, I look at these guys and I'm kind of like, out of all the names, this is the name they came up with. Like, no, I'm just not interested. Like, hard pass for me. Like, no, absolutely not for me.
No thanks. Yeah.
Let's talk about it. Kirk Cousins. What do you feel about Kirk Cousins? I mean, how does he strike you as a guy that you could acquire and bring back to the NFC East?
Yeah, like you said, definitely going to take him over Jimmy G. I think he had a pretty strong year this year. Even last year on what was a down year, numbers-wise, he was pretty strong. I think Kirk, look, they've put a couple pieces around him there, and Justin Jefferson's a phenomenal receiver, but Kirk also gets some credit for putting him in some pretty good positions. I'm not giving him all the credit. Justin Jefferson deserves a world of credit, but Kirk Cousins puts him in a lot of favorable situations. I think you saw KJ Osborne develop some rapport with Kirk this year. And yeah, I think, you bring him to Philadelphia. I think a big thing with all these quarterbacks is Coach Sirianni, I think, will be able to mold the playbook around whatever quarterback. We saw that with Jalen Hurts this year. We saw it in Indianapolis with him and Reich and what they did with 3 different quarterbacks in 3 years. And I think they'd be able to build that with Kirk. I haven't looked at the numbers, but I believe, at least from my eye test, Kirk was pretty strong with play action, if I'm not mistaken. You might have some information on that. And I think that's something with our offensive line and the running back room we have, and hopefully getting another tight end in there this year, depending on how that works out. I think, you get a few pieces in there, you could definitely compete with Kirk. I don't think he takes you all the way. I think there are definitely flaws in his game that could potentially hold you back. And as we've seen kind of down the stretch, he has maybe, like you said with Carson Wentz, the pressure kind of seems to mount for Kirk when the big lights shine bright. And that's something that worries me. I want a quarterback who in Sunday Night Football and playoff games and down the stretch of the season to clinch his playoff spot isn't going to make those big time mistakes. So that's kind of what I worry about with Kirk. How about you?
I think it's a very fair assessment that from a talent perspective and from a clean pocket, Kirk Cousins is a fairly good player. Like, he can throw a very accurate football. He's got tremendous arm strength. He can do those things. Let's be real. All these guys we've talked about, Jimmy Garoppolo and Kirk Cousins and even Carson Wentz this past year, all these dudes had worse markers versus pressure than Jalen Hurts did. I'm not saying Jalen Hurts is there. He's leaving the pocket when it's not necessary. Sometimes he's creating pressure stats because he's leaving when it's not necessary to leave the pocket. Exactly. There's no doubt about it. With that said, the young man's numbers are top 5 versus pressure. This young man can play football, in my opinion. It's just a matter of, can you get the game to slow down a little bit for him? Can you get him to start playing in rhythm with the game? I don't know, man. I don't know if that stuff's going to happen for him. It's hard to say. He's still young. And I know a lot of people say, like, man, he's got a father that coached football. He's got all these things. And, he's had all these opportunities for coaching. And, he's got a personal relationship with Brian Johnson. Like, shouldn't this guy be an advanced passer by now? And I certainly understand the thought process. I get it. But at the same time, it's kind of like, that's not professional. That's not professional football. And he's been on the record before saying that, hey, man, a lot of the mentality stuff I get from Saban. But he doesn't coach quarterbacks up that well. I mean, he put him on blast. That it was really Lincoln Riley was the first time that he was really pressed as a quarterback coach. And, from a quarterback perspective, I should say. I don't know what you do there, man. Like, Kirk Cousins from a clean pocket can play. I know that he can throw an accurate football. I know he's got good arm talent. Underneath pressure, it gets a little shaky with Kirk Cousins. He's not as bad as Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't think you'll have the hilariously, funny plays where it's like, what is this dude doing? But he's not particularly good versus pressure. He's average, I would say. Derek Carr, it's kind of the same situation, right? From a clean pocket. And he's before the ACL stuff, Derek Carr was a fairly good athlete too. But from a clean pocket, Derek Carr can play. Accurate football, decent arm strength. I don't think it's quite Kirk Cousins' arm, but it's decent. He's certainly probably got as good an arm, if not better, than Jalen Hurts. My question is when the pocket breaks down, and it's hard to grade, it's hard to judge because that Vegas, football team's offensive line is not particularly good. So it's not necessarily a fair assessment here. But I do wonder, is Kirk Cousins and, Derek Carr, you kind of said it when you were talking, which is, are we really confident that these guys can elevate you to a very far push in the playoffs? Are they going to get you to an NFC championship game? Are they going to get you to a Super Bowl? Because if you're trading away first round picks theoretically for any of these guys, Garoppolo or, Jimmy G is Garoppolo, but, Kirk Cousins or Derek Carr, you're expecting a return on that investment. And that return is probably going to need to be a late push in the playoffs. You need to make an actual, real run at things. I don't know those three guys are going to give you that. I mean, I know people are going to make the argument, well, Jimmy G's done it with the 49ers. Like, yeah. Have you looked at that roster from top to bottom? Are we really that? I don't think we are, especially defensively. I think that we've got guys that are good football players. We had guys that 3 or 4 years ago would have been incredible to have playing at that level with everybody in place. But some of these guys are past the prime. Some of these guys are, you need youth infused on this football team defensively. I still think that it's a mistake to give away way too much draft capital unless you're getting a dude that elevates the play of the team. I think the options are quite clear who it has to be. And we can swing the conversation and talk about the complexity behind it. But I think there's only 3 guys that meet that criteria. Russell Wilson. Of course, DeShaun Watson. He's got the youth. He's got all that stuff behind him. But we'll get into that. But complex legal situation. And then Aaron Rodgers. The problem is, and I'll ask you, we can start with Russell Wilson. Do you really think that he's leaving Seattle?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think he is quite yet. Maybe that changes as the offseason progresses, but I don't know. It just feels like it's a lot of speculation right now. I don't feel like we've heard anything concrete that he is really looking for a new home. And we heard this last offseason too. He was looking for change last offseason, stuck in Seattle. So I think unless Seattle hears, I want to trade, go find me a trade, I'm going to formally request one. That I think they're going to hold on to him. And I know there's reports that they've requested pretty big packages for picks and star players. They've rejected those packages just to keep Russell Wilson. So even though we have the capital, I'm not sure that Howie's going to want to overpay for, the price that they'll probably want him. And I think Seattle still thinks they can compete. He played a little bit banged up this year. I know he has flaws in his game as well. I think there's times where he runs into sacks and maybe the offensive line isn't as much to blame as the media makes it out to be sometimes. But, I still think they can contend with him on a good year. And I think they're hoping he'll come back healthy and, push them into the playoffs again next year. And I think, a big thing is I was looking on Twitter today and people were talking about, Matthew Stafford just won a Super Bowl at 34 and Rodgers and Brady, these guys are still doing it at their age, or Brady was just retired. Wilson, I mean, a lot of people are saying the 33-year-old, tag is kind of pushing these teams away from him. I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think that's what's really, going to keep teams away from trying to acquire Russell Wilson. I still think at his age and with his athleticism, he can get it done and extend plays and make the big play happen. But yeah, I think that it's unlikely he leaves Seattle before next season.
Yeah, I would tend to agree about the age thing. I mean, I've heard a few people kind of comment on videos and say like, "Oh, he's too old," and it's like, not in today's NFL. He's not, guys.
No.
Like, you can clearly play until you're 38 to 40 years old. I mean, it's not a challenge anymore. I mean, the rules are made to where they might as well just bubble wrap these quarterbacks. I mean,
Yeah,
you can barely touch them at this point, guys. Like, it's not age is not the concern here with a guy like Russell Wilson. I will say that my concern is I saw some. Who knows how accurate these things are? They seem like they're just taking shots at the dark here. But 2 first-round picks this year, a first-round pick the following year, and it's like, yeah, I don't know about that, guys. Like, that's a lot of draft capital to give up for one player. Like,
yeah.
Will Russell Wilson immediately make this offense better? Yeah, 100% he would. There's just no doubt about that. With that said, is that do we have enough pieces to actually make like a really strong playoff run and to build a good enough team around them? We better hit on the other picks. We better hit on those other picks because now we're down 3 picks. And those were premier picks. So it's like, I mean, on one hand, I love the energy the organization has brought since the last draft class. Because despite what everyone wants to say, I feel like we pulled at least 5 guys out of that draft class that we can feel confident in are NFL players. Teron Jackson looks like at least a back end of the roster depth piece guy. Kenneth Gainwell looks like a guy who could be potentially a big role player for a football team. Milton Williams looks like, yes, are there limitations? Sure. That dude's a really good pass rusher on the interior. There's no doubt about it. Landon Dickerson looks like a perennial Pro Bowler. Howie might have finally found another Pro Bowler. Devonta Smith looks like a guy who could potentially develop into like really a top 10, 12 type receiver down the road here to me. I mean, he's that kind of separator versus man coverage. He took a couple of whippings this year. He had a couple of guys that kind of shut him down a little bit, but he responded well against James Bradbury in the second game, which I thought was a really good thing to see, that he was like, okay, you got me once. It's not happening twice.
Exactly.
I feel good about the way the organization has kind of exited things. I do, but we're also losing pieces to the front office. And I was pretty high on Brandon Brown. I said in one of my earlier live streams when this beginning of this year, when we first heard rumblings and rumors about interest in our front office, I said, I really like Brandon Brown. I feel like that would be a pretty big loss because I know his background in scouting. I know he's a former corner. He played collegiately. He's a smart guy. I believe he's got a Juris Doctorate. With that said, it's a good sign. I mean, clearly we'll be able to poach other people to come into our front office because we put dudes into other positions. We will advance your career. With that said,
too, right?
Yes. Yeah, but with that said, you're dealing with this limited time and space of what we do as an organization. That's something I don't know yet. I don't know how we're going to respond in terms of the scouting department. I don't think it's going to affect us this year. It might affect us a little bit next year, but it's really a couple years down the road where you got to worry because that's where a lot of the preliminary work's already been done on this draft class and the next one. But who knows? I mean, who knows what happens there? And giving away draft picks puts you in kind of a compromising situation when it comes to these type of issues. And we've worked really hard to build this, arsenal of picks. Now, I think you hit on it, which is, hey, man, the Rams were not shy about trading those picks away for proven veterans in the league. That's true. You've got to be able to finagle the cap. Howie's done it before. We know how he can, but we also got burnt a little bit by doing that. So it's kind of like, oh, man, I mean, I hear you. A team just hoisted a Lombardi basically following that principle. No doubt about it. But I think it's got to be a combination. I like the way that Cincinnati built it more than the way that the Rams built it personally. To be fair, I think Cincinnati did a good job of mixing draft picks with low-key veteran signings. And to me, I think that's the better way of doing this. But I'll also give the organization an opportunity to prove me right or wrong. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and you look at, like you said, just as your point with Cincinnati, the amount of free agents they acquired on the defensive side of the ball with Awuzie, Trey Hendrickson. I believe they got Ogunjobi in free agency, if I'm not mistaken. People make jokes, Eli Apple. I mean, that was still better than what they had there originally. They made a lot of improvements. And, like you said, they mixed it with draft picks too. Like Logan Wilson was a really nice draft pick they had on that side of the ball as well. And they've had other guys there. I believe Jesse Bates is homegrown too. And the offensive side of the ball, you obviously know the guys that were on there. So I couldn't agree more with you on that point. So I just don't think it's worth the capital the Seahawks are going to want to try to build around Russell and, probably prolong his career and prolong his chase for a Super Bowl title that probably wouldn't happen with the current roster we have.
The next one that is we'll just go with Aaron Rodgers. We'll close it out on the more controversial one. But Aaron Rodgers. I've been watching Pat McCaffrey a little bit here and there just to try to, because I know that, Hawk has an inside to Rodgers. And a lot of people made a lot of stink about, he bought property. He bought property in Tennessee. He's going to the Titans. Hawk kind of insinuated I wouldn't rule it past him to retire. And I was like, I don't see that. I don't see that happening, but I don't know him. I don't know him personally. I know he's I know people are like, yeah, come on, Gay, how smart is he? I mean, look at the things he says. Look, the league should have punished him a lot more harshly for violating league policy. I hear you. The guy's a Cal Berkeley graduate, and if you've ever listened to him talk for 10 minutes, he's smart. Yeah. Gentlemen, he's very, very intelligent. That part I do not doubt about him. What are your thoughts there? Like Aaron Rodgers, to me, it's a pipe dream. It's not happening, in my opinion. It's just not going to happen for a multitude of reasons. Number one reason I would say is, why would he want to come here? You can make the argument outside of Devontae Adams, what did Green Bay have? It's I still feel like their wide receiving core as a total was a lot better than ours. I don't know. Maybe I'm discounting, the sell that Nick Sirianni can be as a young head coach, that maybe guys are going to gravitate towards him and like him, but Aaron Rodgers is almost as old as Nick Sirianni. And I could see that going horrifically wrong too. I could see those two guys hitting heads. Aaron Rodgers is very opinionated. Aaron Rodgers is very intelligent. He's got his opinions on things. Nick Sirianni doesn't strike me as a scholar, but he strikes me as a true through and through football guy. This guy dedicates himself to the craft. He knows his stuff. He's smart in that regard of things. I don't know the young man's intelligence. I've never had a conversation with him, so I can't place it. Do you think that would even be a good marriage if it happened between Philadelphia and Aaron Rodgers? Or do you think it depends, it just depends on the personality mixes in the inside the locker room?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. First off, let me just say I agree with you. I think it's 1,000% a pipe dream. There is no chance in my mind Aaron Rodgers will come here for, he has Alan Lazard as one of his secondary receivers in Green Bay, and you're telling me he's going to want to come here with Jalen Reagor or JJ Arcega-Whiteside as one of his secondary receivers, or even no shot at Greg Ward. I love the guy, but I just don't think that's realistic. As far as the marriage part, yeah, I think it depends. Like you said, I think it could be a really good thing, because I think both of those guys, while they love football, they also want to have fun playing the game too. And you look, just by the way, Aaron Rodgers, sells the play action and just the pump fakes you can tell he has fun out there on the football field. He seems like a pretty laid back and chill guy in the locker room. Quote him, RELAX, when they were 4-6, I think, that one year, and then they go on to win 6 games in a row. So I think in that sense, it could be a good marriage. Like you said, we don't know these guys personally. So at the same time, we know Rodgers from reports that, things did not work out with McCarthy in the long run. They did win a Super Bowl, but that's a concern, because I think, if you're thinking about him choosing between Matt LaFleur, Nathaniel Hackett, and Nick Sirianni, I'm definitely putting Nick Sirianni third on that totem pole. I don't think he would pass up an opportunity with the other two guys. I think him and LaFleur have a good connection. LaFleur seems to have run things well. And, LaFleur has kind of switched things more to a run. I don't want to say run first offense, but definitely setting up things with the run, which I think has, benefited Rodgers. And I think he's really enjoyed that aspect of the Packers offense. And same with going to Denver. You still have some offensive line issues there, but you have some guys on defense, and you have Judy, Surtain, and, I think Tim Patrick is, well, depending on what happens with him, but you have a couple guys there. You have a good running room with Javonte Williams. There's a couple weapons there. I just don't think he would pass up that and being with Hackett to be here with Coach Sirianni and the roster we have right now. I'd be very surprised. And I think a marriage could work, but I could also see, like you said, I could very well see it going south. And in a few years, we're just kind of back to square one where, everything's kind of blown up.
Yeah, that's my biggest fear with Rodgers is that I think Nick Sirianni is very creative, and I do think that Rodgers might have interest in working with Sirianni. But Sirianni is not the same personality type as LaFleur, in my opinion. I think LaFleur is maybe a little bit more laid back and passive. I think Sirianni's definitely fun, but he doesn't strike me as a guy that's going to hold his tongue if he doesn't feel like you're executing the plays correctly. And I could see that becoming a problem if you can't take coaching like that. And that would be my concern with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is like, dude, I'm about to be like a Hall of Famer. Who are you? You're this, saying like upstart coach. Like, you better back up. You know what I mean? Like, I could see that going horribly wrong in a situation where Nick's personality is just like, he's a fiery Italian dude. Like he's gonna speak his mind to you. Like, and I don't know how that would blend. I have no clue how that would blend between those two guys, to be honest. It might be spectacular. Those guys might really get along, and maybe in person, Rodgers might say something to you like, "Hey, man, can you not do that in public like that? Do it more so in private." You know what I mean? But how Nick is. I just don't think Nick can help himself. I think when Nick feels the emotions of the moment, he expresses it, and that would be my fear with that situation. That how it could go horribly wrong quickly. The last guy on the list is DeShaun Watson, and I'll be honest. My statements about Desean Watson have nothing to do with his personal conduct. I do not know Desean Watson personally. I have never met Desean Watson. I know nothing about this case other than the accusations that have been levied against the young man. I am not an attorney. I am, I'm not a judge. I'm not even a guy who spent 3 hours looking into this. I'm a guy who's heard a few things on the news, saw a few articles. I'm not going to weigh in on someone's innocence or guilt in such a serious accusation. I have absolutely no idea. I will say this young man would have to clear these legal hurdles before I would ever even consider bringing him in because the allegations are quite serious.
Yeah.
Now, no action has come from a legal perspective, from what I can tell. This has all been more so personal damages, I think, is what he's really being sued for, is from what I can tell from the little bit of time I've spent on this, guys, which is by far, do your own research. You do not trust me for information on this, guys. I am not the source for that. I don't know what to say about him other than the player is a good football player, talented guy, understands coverages, has the athleticism to break you down if the play breaks down, has the patience and the skill set to pick you apart from the pocket, can play if it's a clean pocket, can play if the pocket breaks down. I still remember the playoff game from a few years ago where it looked like he was dead to rights, spun out of it somehow, and then completed that pass. I mean, it was phenomenal. The player is incredibly talented. He's the right age. But he has been away from football now for a while. And that's the other side of this that is concerning if you did bring him back, which is it's been a while since he's taken a snap under center in a football game. I don't know how long. I don't know the circumstances. I don't know how much he's training outside. I mean, those are all things I can't be, made privileged to. I have absolutely no idea. The age, the skill set, all that stuff makes sense to me if you're going to trade away multiple first-round picks for a guy. This is not a player where we need to argue about his age. You know what I mean? Like, that's not even in consideration. It's not even really part of the conversation with a player of his age. I don't know what to make light of all the other things. There's all this stuff that's outside of just him taking the football from under center and playing quarterback. And that's the side of it that I don't know enough about. I don't know what to think other than it's weird the league hasn't really stepped in and done anything. It seems like a CYA from the league's perspective. That's what it feels like. I mean, Roger Goodell, I want y'all coming after me. I'm just telling you what it seems like from an outsider's perspective here. This very much seems like a CYA. And I don't know. I don't know what to make of this. I'm not really sure how to judge it. I mean, how do you view this situation with Desean Watson?
I think you're 100% right, Steve. Look, there's a lot off of the football field right now that needs to get handled. And look, I'm not even going to speak on any of that. Like you said, it's serious stuff. Whether it's true or not, that's not something we're here to determine. But the fact of the matter is that it's pretty serious stuff that is being talked about right now, and that will prevent him being on the football field. I'll honestly be surprised if he's out there by next year, just because it seems like there's so much going on, yet so little going on, because it feels like we haven't heard anything in a long time about what is going on off of the field and what they're going to do about it. And like you said, NFL we don't really know how to view what they're doing from the outside. It doesn't seem like anything's happening there either. So like you said, as far as a football perspective, I mean, you guys heard him in his one press conference. People go crazy when, someone explains a coverage and explains how they, diagnose the play. We heard Jalen Hurts do that on the one where Dallas Goedert was wide open earlier this year. That'll always attract a lot of attention, but we've heard DeShaun Watson do that a number of times. He's clearly an intelligent football player, understands what he's seeing out there. And honestly, with, the run pass option too, I think there's a reason that Bill O'Brien is over at Alabama now. Maybe he made some poor decisions as the de facto GM of that team, but, he is a guy who is respected in the coaching industry from what I understand. And he's a guy who, with Deshaun Watson, it just seemed like a good match in terms of offensive scheme. They built a lot of concepts around him, and the RPO incorporating Deshaun Watson's legs into some of those run pass options really worked well. And outside of that, just understanding how to run a complex offense in general too. I think he does a really good job of that. And look, if it weren't for the issues, I'd be willing to give up a lot for this young man. I think that he changes, kind of the outlook of any team's season if you plug him in there, on almost any of the 32 NFL teams. Obviously, some teams have their guy. There's, around 10 or 12 teams that probably know what they're going into next year with, but most of the teams in the NFL, he changes the complexion of your football season.
100%. That's the way I view it too, is that I don't know enough about the facts of the case to even remotely give anyone an opinion on what's going on outside of this guy taking the ball underneath center, to be honest.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that if this was just a football conversation, this is the type of player that you leverage against to go get. This is the kind of player you trade those picks away for. Davis Mills came in and played pretty well for the Texans last year. I think the Texans feel like they're in a better place this season at the quarterback position than they were last season. I don't know that Davis Mills is their answer, but I think he's played well enough to at least be considered a bridge guy for them.
Absolutely.
Which may complicate things for teams, because before, maybe you could offer a Tua. Maybe you could offer a Jalen Hurts. Not too sure that they feel the same way about that now they have Davis Mills and he's got some game experience and what they saw him play. It's a complicated situation. I would love the player. The player's a good football player. He just is. With that said, there's nothing we can do. It's outside our control. There's nothing we can do about that situation, because I just don't think the Eagles are going to be interested without having some kind of certainties given to them by their own private investigators, the league, maybe the agent and attorneys of Deshaun Watson. I don't see how you make that move without some kind of guarantees. With that said, man, let's just round it out. We'll talk from the Eagles' perspective, then we can talk nationally. From the Eagles' perspective, do you think any of these moves happen? Do you think the Eagles actually trade for a quarterback this year?
I don't think they do. I think the price has got to be right for Heitter Roseman. As we talked about with Russell, it really is a price thing. It's a high price tag right now. Rodgers, I think, is a pipe dream. And, Watson, we talked about him. That's probably not likely just because of what's going on. And then the rest of the field, I just think you kind of take your chances with a cheaper quarterback in Jalen Hurts, who kind of earned a year 3. So I don't think any of these options are really realistic for the Eagles. I think they're going to go into year 3 with Hurts, and then maybe a draft like a Caleb Ellaby on day 2 or 3 or something like that. That's my best bet.
And that's a conversation we can have for another day when we talk about. It's one thing to talk about trades. There were certain guarantees that were kind of given in the press conference, but these guys, they'll find a way out of it if they fall in love with a guy. And I think we can talk about that on a separate podcast episode about, oh boy, what do we do about the draft? And should we look at this with an eye of skepticism when it comes to Howie Roseman? I agree with you about the trades. I'd say right now it probably leans 60-40 in favor of Jalen Hurts. I leave that really strong possibility at 40% because I think if you can make the value match for Russell Wilson and the circumstances were to change, if things around Deshaun Watson were to change, I could see Howie Roseman very quickly pouncing on those opportunities. I don't really buy the Jimmy Garoppolo stuff. I don't really think it'll be Derek Carr because Derek Carr seems to be working things out with the Raiders as we speak, to be honest. Kirk Cousins, I think, is probably going to be out of Minnesota, but don't know that it'll be to Philly. There's probably I'd say a negative 100% chance that Carson Wentz ends back up in Philadelphia. That seems like a very unlikely proposition to occur. It would be ironic if he came back here to be Jalen Hurts' backup, though. I'm not saying that would happen, but the irony of that would be just beyond belief. I don't know. I don't know that there's any options that I could really feel confident in projecting. Like, I'll leave the door open. I mean, I don't think that they should go after Jimmy Garoppolo. I have no clue how the front office feels. I'll say that. You always got to leave it to where we're assessing it one way. No clue how the front office is assessing it. I would think that at the end of the day, they'll sit down and rationalize this situation just like we have done and go, he's probably not the guy to, like, would he be an improvement? Probably. To an extent, sure. Is this the guy that gets you to a Super Bowl? That seems really, really debatable to me. But that's kind of how I see it as well. Hunter, thank you so much, man. I enjoyed the conversation. This was really fun. For everybody that's listening, we will be doing these podcasts 3 times a week. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we will upload them for you. We will try to get these on every single distribution stream that we can. You can find it here on YouTube, but if you're at work and you cannot watch a video format, but you can listen to audio, we will get it for you. We'll have it on Spotify and everywhere, guys. iTunes. We're going to get it on each and every one of the major platforms. If you are a Google podcast listener, just keep in mind it takes a little time for Google to pick up your stuff. So it will take a little time for Google picks it up. With that said, once again, Hunter, I really do appreciate you, man.
Hey, feeling is mutual, Coach. I appreciate you having me on.
All right, guys. Till the next conversation. Maybe the next conversation leads us directly into, do the Philadelphia Eagles try to sneak one over us all